howled like a living thing, clawing at the edges of the tiny snowbound town. Snowflakes hurled themselves against cracked windows, clinging like desperate ghosts. The streets outside lay buried, silent, erased by white, but one house still glowed. A faint amber light pulsed from behind faded floral curtains, a stubborn ember refusing to die in the dark. Inside sat Martha Bennett, her old fingers moving rhythmically, click, 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 knitting in her worn armchair. Her house was small, nothing fancy, but every wall was lined with stories. Each chipped photo frame whispered a moment once lived. The threadbare rug, the cushions stitched by her own hands, even the soft creak of the wooden floor. They all belonged to a world that used to be full, a world that had Samuel in it. Her eyes drifted to the mantel. There he was forever young, smiling wide, his eyes bright with promises they had once kept. He had built this house with his own hands, stacked the woodpile out back, sat right there on that sofa every winter, humming off-key songs as the fire danced. But now he was 7 winters gone, buried under the same kind of snow that swallowed the world tonight. And David, their only son, was out there somewhere, chasing city dreams. He called sometimes, always rushed, always distracted. Calls weren't presents. Presence was what filled a room, or left it painfully hollow. Martha paused, setting down the needles. The ache came suddenly, like it always did on nights like this. Nights when the wind screamed, when the power across the block had died hours ago, when she was the only warm dot of light left on the street. And no one was here to see it. No one to say goodnight. No one to share the silence. Her gaze swept slowly around the room, over the cold, empty half of the sofa, the untouched second teacup on the tray. Loneliness had weight, and tonight it pressed on her chest like snow on the rooftop, heavy, endless, silent. The storm roared. The wood stove crackled back, and in that little house Martha sat quietly, the last light still burning in the dark. The storm had grown wilder. Wind screamed around the eaves like some furious beast, rattling the shutters, clawing at every crack. The world beyond Martha's windows had vanished completely, just swirling white, endless and merciless. The power across the neighborhood had gone dark hours ago. Houses that once glimmered with cozy lamplight now sat like black silhouettes drowned in snow. But here, in this single stubborn home, the wood stove still burned. Martha had always trusted it. When Samuel was alive, he had sworn by firewood. Electric wires break, he used to say, but wood keeps its promise. The fire's glow painted the small living room in gold. Shadows danced over the faded curtains and the old photographs that watched silently from the walls. Martha's knitting lay forgotten in her lap. The ticking of the old clock and the occasional snap of wood in the stove were the only sounds left. Until, knock. It was sharp, urgent. She froze. Another knock. Louder this time, fast and desperate, cutting through the howl of the wind. Her heart gave a startled leap. Who in their right mind would be out in this weather? She rose slowly, slippers soft against the creaking boards, and shuffled to the door. The cold hit her like shattered glass the moment she cracked it open. And there they were. 4 shadowed figures huddled together on her porch, their outlines trembling under the weak porch light. Snow caked their coats, their hair, their lashes. Breath burst from them in frantic white clouds. At the center was a tall man, John Miller from across the street. His broad shoulders shook, his cheeks raw and crimson from the wind. Beside him, his wife Lisa clutched a small bundle tight against her chest. Their teenage daughter Emma hovered close behind, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. And the bundle stirred. Martha's eyes widened. Inside the layers of blankets was their little boy, Ben. His face was pale, his eyes half shut, lips dry, fever shimmering off him like heat waves. He wasn't shivering. He was too weak even for that. I'm real sorry to bother you, Miss Bennett, John stammered, voice cracking from cold and fear. The whole block's power is out, and Ben's burning up. We saw your light. Figured you still had heat. Lisa's voice broke through, trembling. We don't want to impose. We can wait outside. Just, please, can the kids come in? Just for a little while? Martha stared at them. These neighbors she had spoken to only in passing, quick hellos on summer mornings. And here they stood on her porch in the dead of winter, desperate and shivering, holding a sick child between them like something fragile that might break. She felt the ache in her chest twist, then melt. "Oh, hush that nonsense," she said softly, pushing the door wide. "All of you, come in. No child should be out in weather like this." John hesitated, pride flickering in his eyes, but the storm shrieked behind him and Lisa's pleading glance settled it. They stepped inside and warmth wrapped around them like a living thing. The door closed. The wind roared outside, but here the world exhaled. Heat rose from the old wood stove. The room glowed honey gold. Emma's wide eyes darted around in wonder. Lisa knelt by the fire, unwrapping Ben, coaxing him closer to the warmth. John's shoulders sagged in relief, and for the first time in 7 years, Martha's lonely house felt full again. The storm howled at the windows, but inside, the world had changed. The moment the Millers stepped through the door, the biting cold seemed to retreat like a scolded dog. The wood stove hissed and crackled with life, painting everything in molten gold. Shadows danced along the walls, soft and comforting, as if the old house itself was sighing with relief. Emma crouched near the fire, her hands spread wide, staring at the flames with wide-eyed wonder. Gus, Martha's little scruffy dog, blinked sleepily from his spot on the hearth rug.
Tail thumping lazily. Lisa had eased little Ben onto the faded sofa,
Layering blankets over him, her trembling hands never leaving his small frame. He whimpered weakly, his face flushed but no longer ghostly pale. John stood guard behind them, a towering figure hunched by worry, his big hands uselessly opening and closing as if trying to catch his own fear and crush it. Martha moved quietly, almost on instinct. "Sit," she murmured, voice firm but gentle like a mother laying down the law. "Get those children warm." Then she shuffled toward the kitchen, her old slippers whispering over the creaking boards. Steam soon curled from the kettle on the stove. The clink of mugs, the soft rustle of cookie tins being opened, the faint whistle of boiling water. It was the music of a home that had been silent far too long. When she returned, the living room felt alive. Emma was giggling softly as Gus sniffed her fingers. Lisa had loosened her scarf, color blooming faintly back into her cheeks. John was kneeling by the stove, rubbing his hands together like a man thawing after years in the cold. Martha handed out mismatched mugs, one cracked at the rim, another painted with fading violets. "It's only tea," she said, setting a plate of shortbread on the table, "but it'll warm you." Lisa's eyes shimmered as she accepted the mug. "Miss Bennet." "You didn't have to." "Hush now," Martha said gently. "Nobody should shiver in this house." As they sipped, the tension began to drain away. Warmth crept back into stiff fingers, into trembling shoulders, into frightened hearts. Even Ben stirred, blinking slowly, his gaze drifting toward the glow of the fire. "Mama, where are we?" he whispered, voice raspy. Lisa bent close, stroking his damp hair. "In a magic house," she soothed, her voice breaking. "Just like the stories." Emma grinned, pointing at Gus. "And there's even a castle dog." Something unexpected tugged at Martha's lips. A smile. A small one, shy and rusty from disuse, but real. She lowered herself back into her chair, her knitting forgotten. "That's Gus," she said quietly. "Found him by the roadside when my Samuel was still around. Been our little guardian ever since." Ben's dull eyes sparked with curiosity. He reached a tiny hand toward the dog, who stretched, yawned, and shuffled closer with a gentle wag. John exhaled deeply, his face softening for the first time all night. "You've been real kind, Miss Bennet," he said, his deep voice thick with gratitude. "More than you had to be." Martha's gaze moved slowly over them, the mother cradling her sick boy, the teenage girl stroking the dog, the father watching with quiet hope. And for a fleeting second, the ache in her chest eased. The silence that had haunted her house for 7 long winters was gone. Laughter whispered in the corners. Warmth hummed in the air, and in that golden glow, Martha realized something. Her home wasn't empty anymore. Morning light crept slowly across the Miller family's living room, pale and cold as glass. Martha lay bundled under thick quilts on their sofa, her breathing shallow but steadier now. Lisa sat beside her, quietly stroking her frail hand. John stood by the window, arms folded, his gaze fixed on the little house across the street. Martha's house. It looked hollow. The curtains were drawn. No smoke rose from the chimney. No footprints broke the smooth crust of snow in the yard. Only the faint blue glow of a television flickered inside. Samantha was still there, Alone, unbothered. She'd have died in there, Lisa whispered. John didn't answer, his jaw tight. Then headlights swept across the frosted street. A black SUV rolled to a stop in front of the old house. Its polished surface gleamed like something foreign, out of place among the humble homes. David stepped out. He looked perfect. Pressed coat, polished shoes, but exhaustion etched deep lines into his face. He paused, staring at the dark windows, confusion clouding his eyes. Then the passenger door opened and Samantha appeared. Her platinum hair tucked neatly under a beret, her face pale and carefully composed. They crossed the street together, the crunch of their boots sharp in the still air. A knock sounded on the miller's door. Lisa opened it, calm but guarded. "Where's my mother?" David's voice was level, but an edge of worry trembled beneath it. Samantha clutched his arm, her voice cracking with fake panic. They took her. These people. They stormed in, dragged her away like criminals. I tried to stop them, I swear." John stepped forward. "We didn't storm anywhere. We found her on the floor, collapsed. Your wife stood there and did nothing." "That's not true." Samantha gasped, eyes wide with rehearsed outrage. "They've been spying on me, twisting everything. She's old, she falls, it's not my fault. Uncle David." The voice was small, quiet. Emma stepped forward from the corner, Ben clutching her hand. In her other hand, she held a little digital camera. Ben's toy. David blinked. "Emma, you should see this," she said softly. The room fell still. Only the quiet tick of the wall clock marked the silence. Emma pressed play. The footage was shaky at first, Gus wagging his tail, the fire crackling, Martha humming gently as she knitted by the window. Then it shifted. The warmth vanished. Samantha stood in the living room, her voice cold and sharp on the tinny speakers. "You're nothing but a burden," her recorded voice hissed. "David and I were finally building something real. Success, and now because of you, we're stuck here in this miserable house. This pathetic little town." David's jaw clenched. His eyes stayed locked on the tiny screen, unable to look away. Another clip. Samantha nudging Gus aside with her boot, muttering stupid mutt under her breath. Another, tossing Lisa's home-cooked casserole straight into the trash, and the last, Martha by the window, frail and quiet, the wheels of her chair slipping on the wet tile. Her body crumpling to the floor. Samantha watching, motionless. Her voice cold. "You're in the way." "Always have been." The screen went dark. Silence swallowed the room. David didn't move. Didn't breathe. Confusion, disbelief. Then something heavier. Shame. Samantha's face went rigid. "This is fake," she sputtered. "They're manipulating." "No." David's voice was quiet. Heavy as stone, his eyes rose to meet hers, drained of warmth. "Pack your things," he said. Samantha's lips parted. "David, go!" Her perfect mask cracked. For the first time, her voice trembled. But he didn't look at her. He didn't need to. Minutes later, the door across the street slammed, and Samantha was gone. The snow had softened overnight, sinking into slush along the curbs, glinting faintly under the pale sun. The storm was gone, leaving the town wrapped in a strange, delicate hush, like the air was holding its breath. Inside the Millers' living room, Martha stirred beneath the quilts. Her eyelids fluttered, then lifted, and she blinked against the dim light. Her lips were dry, her voice faint. "Where am I?" Lisa's face broke into a smile. She was at her side instantly, gently easing her upright. "You're safe, Miss Bennett. We brought you here." "You fainted." Martha's eyes wandered, taking in the unfamiliar room, the scattered toys, the worn couch, the smell of coffee. Then they settled on the figure standing near the window, motionless as a statue. David. He stood with his back to her, shoulders stiff, hands trembling at his sides. The polished veneer was gone. His tie hung loose, his hair disheveled, his face hollow from sleepless hours. "David," Martha whispered. He turned slowly. His eyes were red, not from anger, from grief, from shame, from years of silence catching up to him all at once. "Mom," he breathed. One word, raw and cracked, like something breaking. He crossed the room in 3 unsteady steps and fell to his knees beside her. His head bowed, forehead pressed to her frail hands. "I'm sorry," he choked. "God, I'm so sorry. I left you." "I let her. I didn't see. I didn't want to see." Martha's thin fingers trembled as they cupped his cheek. "You were chasing your dreams," she said softly. That's what fathers hope for their sons. I was chasing noise, David whispered, and I forgot what home sounded like. For a long time, neither of them moved. Just mother and son holding each other in the quiet. Lisa stood silently by the fire, tears in her eyes. John had his arm around Emma's shoulders. Even little Ben watched, wide-eyed as if witnessing something sacred. Later, when Martha could stand, David helped her across the street. Their boots crunched in the melting snow, the cold air sharp but strangely gentle. Her house stood waiting, small and weathered and stubborn as ever. The door creaked, the familiar scent of pine and wool wrapping around her like an old song. Inside, everything was still. The fire was dark. Gus padded forward quietly, tail wagging, pressing his head against her leg with a soft whine. David bent down, stacking kindling in the hearth. His hands, once clumsy with such things, moved carefully now, almost reverently. He struck a match. Flames caught, tiny sparks blooming into warm orange light. Martha sank into her armchair, the old spring sighing under her weight. The house seemed to exhale with her. David stood behind her, eyes scanning the photographs on the mantel, her and Samuel on their wedding day, him holding baby David in the yard. All sun and laughter. I don't deserve to be here, David said quietly. Home, Martha murmured, isn't about deserving. It's about returning. He knelt beside her again, and this time she drew him close, her thin arms holding tight to the man who had once been her little boy. Outside, the last of the ice melted from the trees. Emma and Ben were building a snow fort in the yard, their laughter ringing like bells in the crisp air. Gus trotted between them, tail wagging furiously. Lisa and John stood by the fence, watching the scene unfold with quiet smiles, and inside, warmth returned to the house on the corner, the house that had been lonely for too long, but had never stopped waiting for love to come home. Days passed. The storm outside eased, and with it, something inside Martha softened too. The Millers had kept visiting even after the power on the block returned. Lisa would bring hot soup in mason jars. Emma always had a pocket full of treats for Gus. Ben, now recovered, would toddle straight to the hearth each time, demanding fire stories, as Martha rocked gently in her chair and told him about the winters when his own house hadn't even been built yet. Laughter had returned. Warmth had returned, and then, without warning, the front door opened on a bitter Tuesday morning. And the air shifted. Mama? It was her son, David. Martha's heart jolted. He stood there framed in the doorway, tall, polished, wearing a city suit beneath his winter coat, a thin layer of snow melting on his shoulders. And beside him was her, Samantha. She was all sharp edges, sleek hair, cold eyes, lips pursed in disapproval before she even stepped inside. Her perfume hit the room like chemical frost, battling the warm smell of wood smoke and cinnamon tea. Mama, David said again, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We came to check on you. The Millers were there, huddled around the fire as usual. Emma froze mid-laugh. Ben's toy car slipped from his hand and rolled across the rug. Oh, Samantha said, her tone a blade wrapped in silk. Company. Neighbors, Martha said softly, standing with effort. They helped when the storm hit. Samantha's gaze swept the room like she was cataloging each imperfection. The faded rug, the cracked teacup on the table, the ash-stained hearth. Her nose wrinkled. This place smells old. It is old, Martha replied gently. Full of memories. Samantha didn't answer. She just glided toward the sofa and perched like a cat on glass. David followed, eyes darting between his wife and his mother like he was stuck between two storms. The warmth that had wrapped this house began to peel away. Lisa stood, gathering Ben in her arms. We'll come back later, Miss Bennett. Wait, Martha began, but Samantha's icy smile cut her off. Yes, that's probably best. My mother-in-law needs rest. John's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. One by one, they slipped out the door, the glow around the room dimming with them. The latch clicked shut like a lock on a treasure chest, and silence swallowed everything. Samantha looked around with a frown. Honestly, David, it's freezing here. We should replace this antique stove and get central heating installed. She likes the stove, David muttered. She likes being stuck in the past, Samantha snapped. This place is falling apart. If she's going to live here, she needs real care, not tea parties with strangers. The words struck like cold water. Martha said nothing. She only sat back down, her hands folding in her lap. The fire still burned, but somehow the room felt colder than it had during the storm. Days turned into weeks. The Millers stopped coming. They said they didn't want to intrude, but Martha saw the way Samantha's eyes followed them like knives. The laughter faded. The hearth went quiet. David buried himself in work calls from the city. Samantha filled the house with clattering high heels and criticism. The old warmth drained away until Martha's home felt hollow again, like it had before the storm, only worse because this time it wasn't loneliness. It was coldness, living inside her own walls. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Gone were the children's giggles echoing through the halls. Gone were Lisa's gentle knocks or John's deep reassuring voice as he carried in firewood. Even Gus seemed subdued, spending his days curled in a tight ball by Martha's feet as if trying to protect her from something unseen. But it wasn't unseen. It walked these rooms in clicking heels and whispered venom with a smile. Samantha. At first her comments were small, almost invisible, like frost creeping across glass. Still using these curtains, they look tired. Shouldn't someone clean up all this clutter? Old people collect so much. Then the whispers turned into knives. David and I had plans. Real plans. We were building a future. But instead here we are, stuck in this frozen museum. Her words slithered through the quiet. You just had to fall ill. You just had to need saving. Martha tried to ignore it. Tried to tell herself Samantha was just unhappy, far from home. But the words stuck like splinters. Each one lodged deep, drawing blood where no one could see. Her body felt heavier with each passing day. The cough that had begun as a tickle became an anchor in her chest. Breathing grew hard. Carrying logs from the porch left her trembling. Still, she said nothing. Pride was the last shield she had left. Then came the day she fell. The sky outside was slate gray, a few snowflakes tumbling lazily past the window. Martha had tried to sweep the tracked-in snow from the kitchen tiles. Samantha stood across the room, slicing an apple with precise, uncaring motions. You know, she said, her tone sugar-laced with poison. This isn't the life David imagined. Or me. He deserves better than this. Martha's broom faltered in her frail hands. Samantha's voice sharpened, each word cutting clean. You cling to this place like it's all that matters. Like you're all that matters. You're not. You're just in the way. The words struck harder than any storm. Martha's foot slipped on the wet tile. The world tilted violently. She gasped, then crumpled sideways. Her frail body hit the floor with a sharp, hollow crack. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Samantha only watched, not moving, not helping, not even flinching. She popped another slice of apple into her mouth, chewing slowly. See, she murmured, brushing invisible crumbs from her hands. Exactly my point. Martha lay still, pain blooming through her bones, humiliation burning hotter than the ache in her ribs. Her vision blurred. For the first time in years, she felt small, like the house around her had shrunk, pressing in until there was no air left. Then, the door burst open. Miss Bennett? Lisa's voice cut the silence, sharp with alarm. John was behind her, his face pale. They rushed forward. John knelt, gently lifting Martha's fragile frame as Lisa pulled the wheelchair closer. Samantha leaned lazily against the wall, arms crossed, eyes bored. She fell, Samantha said flatly. Lisa's eyes flashed. And you just left her there? She does that now, Samantha replied with a shrug. Falls. John's jaw clenched as he eased Martha into the chair. If you cared even a little, please, Samantha scoffed, cutting him off. If you care so much, then you take care of her. The air crackled with tension, heavy and bitter as smoke. Lisa's eyes met John's, and in that silent glance, they decided. They wheeled Martha out the door. And just like that, the little house that had once been so full of warmth was left. Colder than it had ever been.